Over to the rapporteur.
Thank you. So, hello everyone. I'm Gwendoline DELBOS-CORFIELD, rapporteur of the Parliament on the situation on Hungary. Indeed, we are having this resolution voted tomorrow and a debate this afternoon. It's been something that we've been thinking about for the last 2 months, because so it's a proposal that we initiated not last Strasbourg, but the Strasbourg before, because you have in front of you a team. We work as a team a lot, so Sophie is replacing in an exceptional manner Ramon Astrugario, that is the shadow, but here are my shadows, and we really try to step by step make this Article 7 procedures and all of the things around the situation in Hungary work and have a strong parliament on this. And in Strasbourg, not in May Strasbourg, but in April Strasbourg, it's the moment where the Hungarian government proposed this Whistleblower Act that was even voted in Parliament. This Whistleblower Act was, we felt, a very, very new, dangerous step, a strong step. This Whistleblower Act was meant to entice citizens to denounce their co-citizens around topics like rainbow family, but also if they knew people that were not agreeing with the narrative of the government or with the constitution and all of this. So this was for us a perversion of the Whistleblower Act that was very strange. I used at the time the word of a Putinian path. I think that already the anti-LGBT law, which they called the Protecting Children law, but we know is an anti-LGBTI law, was already very inspired by the Putin law of 10 years ago, and now it was a new step to create an atmosphere in Hungary of denouncing each other and always also finding enemies inside of your own country. In fact, to be very clear, you may know that since Friday afternoon, this law has been withdrawn. So it was voted, but they now in Parliament on Friday afternoon withdraw this law. But that was the starting point of this idea of having a new resolution. We have had a lot of debate and resolution on Hungary in the Parliament, with the focus moment of the resolution in autumn, updating the Sargentini report. Since then, we didn't have any debates or resolution. Things were not improving, but things were not also, there were no real new developments, because I think the authoritarian path has been basically achieved by the Hungarian government, so there's not that much more development. But this new step was for us a strong step. That's why we decided as a team that we wanted to have a resolution in Parliament and a debate. It took 2 months to get, but now we are it. And in fact, the fact that it became a bit late was very convenient, because it's now coincided with also the hearing done by the Swedish presidency in the General Affairs Council, which happened, you may know, yesterday morning. So in this resolution, we make a state of play. We say our concern about this law that was in place but was taken out. We say our concern for another law that we know is in work in progress, not yet voted, which would deprive teachers from the right to strike, a new status law about students, teachers, but would also control the students, the teachers, really monitor what they do and say. This is in preparation, in brewing. So that's what we say in the resolution, and we ask again for recommendation. We ask again for keeping the fund froze. This is more of a budget topic, but we work on this in Libe very much also. So we ask for the freezing to be continued by the Commission, because we do think that things have not improved, neither on integrity, neither on independence of judiciary. And also, and I will come to this as a last point, we also collectively decided that it was time for us to have the debate started on the Hungarian presidency of the Council, starting on the 1st of July 2024, when this new parliament will be renewed and when the Commission mandate will start. This is something we have been concerned for a long time. I have been concerned since years. I have flagged this, raised this in many occasions, in confidential meetings with Commission and Council, but also in debates, in press conference with you. And for the moment, it has always been a bit of a taboo. I've always been answered that well, yeah, we can't do anything about it. There's Hungarian presidency, okay, that's it. We need to live with it. And also, I've often been told, but don't worry, this is a sacrificed presidency, because this is the presidency where nothing happens. There's no new laws. So in our bad luck, we are in luck because at least it's not in the worst moment. And I was not satisfied with this answer. But when we discussed it in Strasbourg, I remember that we all suddenly realized, no, but it's also the first presidency of the new Commission, of the new Parliament. It's also the presidency, I think it's you, Thijs, that made us all realize that. It's the presidency where we here will be making the hearings of the commissioners. It's the presidency where you start putting in place what will be the future of the 5 years for European Union. And we also must remember that it's the presidency where probably the Ukraine conflict will not be finished, Ukraine war in one way or another, and we have very strong noises coming from Hungary on this specific topic of Ukraine and Russia and Putin. Who will this presidency invite? Where will this presidency decide to go when they do official mission on behalf of EU? And what will this presidency say on behalf of EU? So it's very good news that this little sentence in this resolution made such a noise in the last 4 days. I really was amazed, surprised. It's a bit of a miracle. It seems that suddenly we wanted to put the topic on the table, we wanted the topic to exist, and suddenly it is really brewing. And we've even had rumors that in the Council some member states and some governments are indeed very concerned with this, which is very good news. At least now things can not be put on the side. It will be for us to invent now what we can do about this presidency. Official text from the treaties and all this are not very talkative about what we can do or not do. Even experts that I consulted are not very clear on what can be done. I think the other member states themselves don't really know. So we need to invent, but that's also what we've been doing on Article 7 procedure since the very first day, because the lines in the treaties were very short, so we had to invent. So now we need to start discussing this and see how we will deal with the situation. And now I will leave the floor to my shadows. Isabel?
Thank you very much for being here and your interest in our resolution on Hungary. As you know, we tabled the resolution because we continue to be worried about the situation of the rule of law in Hungary. In our view, there is no progress in the Article 7 procedure, and ahead of us, as Gwendoline just said, it is of concern that Hungary is due to hold the presidency of the European Union from July 2024 on. In fact, the third stage will begin in a month's time, as the Council 18 months programme is due to be agreed by the 3 presidencies concerned from July this year on. But our concern, in view of the statements Viktor Orbán has made, the people he is likely to invite officially and the visits he is likely to make, are really of concern. These 6 months during which Hungary will, in fact, somehow be the face of the European Union. I listened carefully yesterday to the press conference given at the end of the General Affairs Council by Jessica Roswell, Minister of EU Affairs of Sweden, and Věra Jourová, Vice President of the Commission. And in fact, the statement of the Vice President after the hearing of Hungary by the Council confirms the absence of progress made by Hungary in aligning with European values regarding the Organization for Security and Cooperation on Election, the need to reduce the advertising of the government during the campaign, the independence of the ombudsperson, the independence of the media regulator, the transparency of the state advertising. The public media remains a contentious issue. No positive developments regarding the right of equal treatment and concerns in the area of privacy and data protection. And even the only slightly positive points that were made on judicial independence and fight against corruption and conflict of interest, the Vice President added that there was still a lot of work to do. Now, this confirms our doubts about the efficiency of the ways the Council is applying Article 7. I cannot agree with Věra Jourová when she says that it is the process that is valuable. That's really what she said yesterday. Now, coming back to the Hungarian presidency, as Gwendoline said, it is really the topic that gladly makes waves. Both Vera Jourova and Jessica Roswell insisted on the fact that the issue of the Hungarian presidency was not discussed beforehand. But curiously, the answer to this point was well prepared, intentionally short, and mechanically repeated. The minister said, the question was not raised in the Council. The rotation is in the treaty. She expects that every presidency respects the rule of the Council and all its member states. And the Vice President said, we did not discuss it at the Commission and we act accordingly to the treaty. The journalists raised the question 4 or 5 times, getting always the same laconic answer. So, from our side, we don't say that the Council what the Council should do, but we ask the Council to find a proper solution to protect the European Union and its fundamental values. I think we would fail as a European Parliament if we wouldn't share our concerns and ask for action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwendoline, and thank you for organizing this press conference. Thank you all for coming. Well, I would like to start with that I want to say what the Council should do. The Council should actually understand the seriousness of what is happening here. Hungary is no longer a democracy. There is sitting around the table a country among the 27 that is no longer a democracy. And I was in Budapest last week and speaking to many parliamentarian students, journalists, NGOs, and they are tired, downhearted, and sometimes even demoralized. And we cannot leave them alone. But the fundamental point is that the Council should understand the seriousness of the fact that this country is no longer a democracy. And that means that also every conversation about reforms, about what the government in Hungary is now trying to do to maximize results in terms of getting funding unfrozen in exchange for minimum effort. Minimum effort that can also be turned back. Because that is the warning we got also back in Hungary, that even the small steps that are now on the table could be easily revoked again without us even having the potential of intervention. So the Council should really start to understand the seriousness of it. And it affects every topic, every other topic of our work here in the EU. And Viktor Orban still seems to live under the illusion that he can use the EU as a cash machine, as an ATM, without bearing the consequences of the signature, of signing up to the values of this union. And I think that he has to understand that he cannot have it both ways. You cannot be a member of the EU happy with a few, and the EU being happy with a few small changes, and then curtailing Hungarians and playing into Putin's hands at the same time. That is not a possibility, that is not an option, and the Council should understand this. And I also want to stress a point that has not been mentioned yet. Orban's detrimental impact on the EU's foreign policy. He is vetoing important decisions, for example, in support of Ukraine, damages our credibility hugely, externally, and that would obviously become more detrimental if Hungary was to hold the presidency of the Council. And indeed, I emphasized the importance of this particular presidency. Every presidency is important, but this one is particularly important, not to speak about the warm relations of Mr. Orban with not only Putin, but also with clear destabilizers like Vučić and Dodik. It would be a disaster if this country would get the hold of the presidency and Orban would do what he already said publicly. He would try to push his agenda, his agenda, the agenda of Hungary, into the European Union, which obviously, clearly, is not the task of a country holding the presidency. So I think that we are way beyond the moment of a warning. We urge the Council to take action. And to end with, I actually am really sick and tired of hearing back from the Council that they had a good discussion, a good exchange, and that the discussion, also yesterday, helped them to understand the problems. We are way beyond that point. We should act now. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I make my points, one slight technical correction. I'm not here as a replacement of Ramona as a shadow. We are all co-authors of a joint resolution of all the political groups. And one of the reasons that my group wanted a resolution and that we quickly agreed with the groups that are represented here, of course, was originally the conditionality issue and the fact that we were very concerned by the noises from Commissioner Hahn, who seemed to suggest that, well, you know, Orban was doing quite well and we're not that far removed from a deal. And incidentally, to be very clear, the European Commission is not negotiating with Hungary or indeed Poland. It has to assess the compliance with the criteria, which is not the same thing. So I'm very worried if I hear the Commission say we're negotiating. No, they're not negotiating. There is no negotiation on the rule of law. But we were a bit worried that Commissioner Hahn was too eager to give the green light to Mr. Orban, and we also occasionally have the feeling that he forgets that this is not about budget conditionality but rule of law conditionality. This is clearly, as a commissioner for budget, this is something which is not on top of mind. Therefore, we wanted the resolution as a little reminder to Commissioner Hahn. But then, in the meantime, indeed, the issue of the presidency also reared its head. And like my colleagues, I would like to say that I'm slightly underwhelmed by the sense of urgency and the determination of the Commission and the European Council. Expecting a strong statement and determined action by the Council is a bit like waiting for Godot, I suppose. And we can see that their 13 years of appeasement with Mr. Orban have been a resounding success. Not. But with regard to the presidency, obviously it's for the Council itself to determine what to do with the Council presidency. We would, of course, strongly recommend that they have a stiff talk with Mr. Orban and convince him to skip his turn. But if they do not do so, then the European Parliament is not entirely powerless. Because the treaties say nothing about an obligation of the European Parliament to work with a Council presidency and in what way. And I think there are many ways in which we can use the, let's say, usual cooperation channels during a presidency to make a point. For one, I think we should strip this presidency of all the glitter and glamour. No photo ops, no glitzy conferences. And I think, rather than giving an exclusive podium to Mr. Orban and his sidekicks, we should actually give a podium to those who have been silenced in Hungary. And of course, we then run the risk that the Orban-controlled media are not going to report on this. Therefore, I think every time we have somebody from the government on a podium, that person should be accompanied by somebody who has been silenced by the Orban regime. So a journalist, an academic, an NGO, you name it. And the second thing we can do is, well, there probably will not be a whole lot of legislative activity during that particular presidency, but I think we should also keep in mind that people were a bit worried about how Orban or his government is going to lead trilogues. Well, trilogues are not compulsory. We can also just vote. First reading, second reading, third reading. That's the normal procedure. We don't have to do trilogues. We don't have to depend on the Council presidency. There are the traditional procedures. So I think we can think of many more ways of stripping the presidency of all the opportunities for Orban to turn it into a podium for himself, make it a podium for the Hungarian people, and reduce the cooperation to the bare minimum. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. I will not repeat all the observations that our as the European Parliament and our colleagues have outlined here in terms of the authoritarian drive and the development towards a non-democracy in Hungary. Most of us, all of us here have of course been to Hungary. We have met people, we have heard the stories, we know what they are experiencing. And I think it's very welcome that the EP is taking a lead, while the Council and the Commission has like this putting your head in the sand is definitely what they have been trying to do, while we have been raising this in different forums. And now it's our way to say it out publicly. And so, yes, there is actually an elephant in the room, and it's called the EU presidency. And to have a country that has been ruled out in terms of rule of law, to hold the president, to lead our work, it is, you know, it's like Isabel says, it weakens us all as a European Union. And it's also dangerous in terms of the situation we have now. It's actually the only bromance going on at that leadership level is between Putin and Orban. And I don't think we need that at this particular time. So I think that without sincere steps from Hungary to walk down the path of democratization and rule of law, they cannot hold the EU presidency. It will be detrimental to all of us and also to people living in Hungary. So I would echo what has been said by my colleague Sophie here. Skip the Hungarian presidency. Say that you're very, very welcome back in the rotating systems once you adhere to the principles of rule and law and democracy. The Council has all the powers to act, and it has all the responsibility to act. And they have to do it now, because as was said here, it's just around the corner. And in addition to that, the European Parliament, of course, we will have to take and look at what measures we can do if the Council, and depending on what the Council does. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your statements. Seeing as how we are running quite over time, I'm going to ask the rapporteur, the MEPs, if it's okay to group questions, and also the journalists to make sure to address a specific MEP if that's possible in their questions, so we can save some time and take as many questions as possible. Right, so questions in the room? Yes.
This is Sándor from Euronews. Do you have any conditions, like if Hungary changes this or this, they can, if you will change your opinion on the Hungarian presidency? And I see the major groups are in line with this resolution, so it's very likely that it's going to pass tomorrow, right?
And if we can take another question already. Is there another question in the room? Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie Wax from Politico. Thanks to Sophie in T VELD for giving details about how to strip the Hungarian presidency of meaning, but would Ms. DELBOS-CORFIELD, would you have any other ideas? You talked about the need to invent a way to sort of abstain from or block or prevent this presidency from happening. Can you think of any other possible ideas, no matter how far-fetched?
And a third one, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yes, it's Thomas Mignedina from Swiss Television. The European Union successfully passed a Janša presidency a few years ago. Okay, this time is different because it will have the beginning of the new legislature, but have you identified any particular place where Hungary could create troubles? Because I cannot think of any, but maybe there is some obscure GAC passage or something where they might play a disruptive role. Thank you.
On the question of changes, of course, if in the next year Hungary was to change from one statute to another, we would not only be giving them the presidency, but we would be so happy because I mean this is not a judicial or legal fact. It's citizens' lives we are talking about, citizens' well-being in a country. The thing is, this parliament in autumn, last autumn, agreed that Hungary was no more a real democracy and it was an hybrid system. And this parliament had a majority to vote that, an overwhelming majority. It's also an assessment made by a number of think tanks and international organizations. So the changes are going back from a hybrid system to a real democracy, so the changes are huge. Will it be voted tomorrow? Yes, it will be voted with a large majority. As you can see, the 5 groups, these 5 groups are backing this resolution, and since the beginning, once again, this resolution is coming from all of us. It is very important to have a strong parliament. We meet on a regular basis because we take this Article 7 procedure very seriously, which sometimes seems to be only the case for some of us, but we do, the 5 of us. We do this seriously. On what would be possible, indeed, Sophie made a few examples. It has been already, I understand in history, it has already been possible. There was a moment where trilogues were indeed boycotted by the parliament. Because they were not agreeing with one presidency behavior. So there's already been, on a short lapse of time, things that have been tried. It could be another time where we do that for 6 months. I just want to raise 2 problematics, and that's why I think that the Council we need the Council to do more. The first thing is that we cannot decide for the next Parliament. I want to raise that. I mean, people will enter into office on the 1st of July as MEPs exactly at the same time as this presidency starts. So we are asking newcomers, I mean, most of people will be back, I guess, but a number of newcomers, and we're asking a new parliament, maybe with a new president, you don't know. I mean, we are asking all of these people to immediately, in 1 week, take the decision to boycott. So we can only do recommendation, we can say this parliament what we think should be done, but, you know, that's the first thing. The second thing is that, once again, all of this will not have an effect on, I mean, I think that some of Sophie's ideas are very, very good, and specifically the one putting on the podium other people of Hungary, and not only the government, but that will not change the fact that the parliament will not be managed to prevent the Hungarian government to take certain stands publicly. If they go on an official mission, it won't be able to prevent some missions. It won't be able to prevent if they invite someone that we don't agree with. I mean, all of this, the power of the parliament, if it was to exercise it, and I'm very sorry because most of the time it doesn't. I mean, we are probably some of the MEPs that would like sometimes this parliament to be more powerful, but they doesn't always exercise completely its power. But even if it was, it has a limited stretch. The last question I really did not understand, because I think that a number of examples was given that specifically it's what the tone that you set for presidency in what you say. We all know that has an importance. Some presidency wants to give a social color to their presidency. Some presidency want to give fundamental rights color to their presidency. Some will be very high-tech. I mean, what you put on the agenda, what press conference you organize, who you go to meet, who you invite, has a signification and brings something in the public debate. So, yeah, that is very damageable if Hungarian government decides to use this as to serve their own narrative, as Thijs said. And anyway, and I will finish on this, I mean, once again, we have this Article 7 procedure. It's in the treaty. What does it mean when a country has been declining since 12 years? First resolution of this parliament, I always recall, is from 2011. 2011, this parliament was already flagging, we have a concern, a huge concern, not a little one. 12 years of declining and 5 years under Article 7 procedure. And you just can have your presidency like that, like any other government, any other member states. You have the same privilege, you have the same rights. I mean, how does this function? Shouldn't we be questioning this? I even think that if there were one day changes in treaties, we should think about the fact that after a certain time doing how long can you stay in Article 7 procedure? 15 years, 20 years, and nothing happens? How is this logical? How is European Union defending itself in that sort of case?
All right. I think a couple of MPs have something to add, or maybe.
Well, maybe to add to Gwendoline, if I may, on the question on the Janša government, I disagree. I vividly remember, for example, just an example, the communique after the fall of Kabul, which was clearly inspired by a toxic, very bad narrative, because the Council is holding the pen. The Council is holding the pen when starting with these communiques. And also, the Janssen government only just started, very much inspired by his good friend Orban. So I would say, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because this government, and Orban in particular, clearly expressed that he wants to push his agenda, that he wants to use this presidency. So I think that the comparison with the Janssen government, that fortunately also gives us the example of a country that can change for the better. But I think he was only just starting, and I think this is clearly a point where I think the Council does not understand the seriousness of what is ahead of us.
Yes, again, we move ourselves and we respect the treaty. So there are prerogatives for the European Parliament, there are others for the Council. So I again want to reiterate that we ask the Council to act. And Gwendoline said it in the beginning. She was looking what are the margins in which they can act. What does the treaty allow or not allow? I did the same. I'm convinced that Article 7 allows the Council to suspend the country of certain rights deriving from the applications of the treaties, when that country fails systematically and over time to respect the fundamental values of the European Union, enshrined in the Article 2. So this gives the Council, not us, but the Council, a large maneuver possibilities. And they should really act, because this is not something that will be easy. And in fact, it will be. We have to think about the European Union as this strong democratic institution, and what can come is not easy for the European Union. For what we give as an image to the world.
One sentence, Sophie. Yes. Well, I think we should also look, in addition to what has already been said, at whether the failure of the Council to take any steps vis-à-vis Hungary, and specifically with regard to the presidency, because I agree with Isabel that there are definitely legal possibilities, but whether their behavior doesn't qualify as a lack of sincere cooperation. We shouldn't only be looking at Hungary, we should also be looking at the Council, because let's not forget that the only reason that Mr. Orban has this power is because of the European Council. It's the only body that is giving him this power. Nothing else, not even his own government. It's the veto, it's the fact that they all want to remain friends because they're going to need his support for something else. It's a perverse system. And they're keeping him powerful. So they're giving him all the tools, all the weapons. So I think the European Parliament should also, become a little bit more of a political animal and enter into the fight with the European Council and the Commission as well. I mean, we're very good as a legislator, but it's about time that we start to play hardball. Because yes, we're asking them to scrap the Hungarian presidency, but maybe we should also look at consequences for the cooperation with those two bodies. As to conditions, we could ask him to become a Democrat again. Not very likely. I mean, he might as well become an astronaut or a ballet dancer. On solution, you mentioned boycotting the trilogues. I want to be clear. I wasn't calling for a boycott of the trilogues.
Not doing it.
I'm saying the trilogues are not a formal instrument. They're an informal arrangement for negotiations in order to, not get into second reading and third reading. But we're not obliged to do it. We can just go through the procedure and do first reading, second reading, third reading if necessary. And with regard to damages, I think you've already highlighted a couple of situations. At the same time, I think we should also not overestimated. We're talking about the rotating council presidency. It's not as if they're, you know, it's not as if they're passing laws by decree or something like that. But it's the visibility, it's the podium that they get. So that is, I think, where we also have to. I mean, assuming that the council is not going to have the cojones to strip him of his presidency, we should focus on how do we reduce it to the bare minimum, and where we cannot avoid giving the Hungarian presidency the podium, we'll put somebody else next to him.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, to have a presidency that is no longer can be defined as a democracy, heading the EU work for 6 months, it's just a no-go. It should be a no-go. And I'm actually ashamed on behalf of the Commission and the Council at this press conference, repeating mechanically speaking notes. That's just not good enough. It's not good enough. And I would say to them that you use the tools at your disposal according to the treaty. You take away the Hungarian presidency now, and you have to solve this quite quickly. And then we can move forward. And there are lots of recommendations from this parliament. And we wouldn't wish anything more than democracy being reinstated and rule of law and equality, respect for fundamental rights in Hungary. We're working every day with people in Hungary on these issues. So that's our main goal. But this concerns us all. We just cannot let Hungary take that space for 6 months.
All right, well, I'm afraid we have run out of time. Many thanks to our MEPs for being here today. Many thanks to our interpreters.